Hey guys, this video I think is long overdue. I haven't done a how-to food photography video in a little while, and I thought I better get back at it because I love doing food photography. Now, this is going to be my approach on how I do food photography. I got a lot of tips for you, and I'll show you how I do it. This one though is going to be geared a little more to using your smartphone. In my case, I'm going to be using the iPhone 14 Pro. It'll work with any smartphone. So, without further ado, if you're into food, like I'm into food, let's get into it. Now, food photography, it's an art. It's not exact. Experiment. Have fun with it. Try new things, and you may discover a new way of doing something that no one else has thought of. Now, my approach doing food photography is, what do I want to photograph? What is my subject? Then I figure out, what story do I want to tell? What mood, what feeling do I want to convey? What am I trying to prove or do with this image? That is my first step. The next step, and I'm going to say this, clean your lenses. Make sure the lenses on your cell phone are clean. They've been in your pocket, purse, wherever. They're dirty, they're grungy, clean it. You want the best quality image you possibly can get. Now, when you're telling a story, you want a mood to the image. Is it dark and grungy, light and airy, festive? Are you trying to project a sense of place and time? Now, here in this image here, I'm doing a little bit of a morning tea setup. Could be on vacation. I've got a journal there. I've got a pen sitting there. So it's kind of like a little morning or afternoon setup. Could be even late evening. Could be tea time. But it gives you a little bit of a story by the propping that I put with it to help create a better looking image. Now also with our images, we want to try and get the senses going. It's a photo. It's hard to convey, the senses in it. How can you smell it? How can you touch it? How can you taste it? How can you hear it? Well, we want to try and convey that in our images the best we can. So here I am cutting this lovely crusty bread, and you can hear the knife tearing through it, and you can audibly hear it. So I need to try and convey that into a photo. So I sprinkle some crumbs around to help show that it's a crusty bread and it was kind of flying around while I was cutting into it. So you want to try and convey and evoke all the senses you possibly can by doing little tips and tricks in there. By spreading those crumbs around, it helps show how crusty that bread is. Now, another way you can help get the senses going is to really try and entice them into it, because you want them to eat that food. I mean, look at this cheesecake here with that cherry sauce there just kind of dripping. That looks good. That looks inviting. And it's all done, not just because it's close to the lens, but the lighting. And with the drip going, it just entices you. Look at this Kraft Dinner on the fork. Look how creamy it looks. And it's that setup and the creaminess look to it which helps evoke the senses in you. And if you love Kraft Dinner, then you're going to want to take that mouthful off that fork. Now, another way that you can help tell a story is by adding people into your images. You don't need the whole person in there, just a hand, just part of their body, showing part of an activity. Including people in your images greatly help tell your story. And I just love this one here of the little girl drinking a lemonade right out of the pitcher. But that's one of the rare occasions where I've used a whole person in the image. Normally, it's just part of the body or a hand, but it helps tell the story, and sometimes it tells it better than just a single plate of food, especially if you're doing more of a how-to and you're mixing and blending things. Then having someone actually physically kind of doing that in the image helps tell your story even better. So tell your story, invoke those senses, get the emotions going with what you're doing within the image. So now that we've figured out how we can tell a story, how we can get the senses evoked, and we know what mood and everything else we want to do with that image, the next thing that I do is I think about my background. What am I putting it on? What's behind it? Now, you could have DIY'd a background yourself, some stuff on some foam core. It could be different types of wood, small. You can do small backgrounds, you can do large backgrounds, whatever your purpose needs. There's a whole wide variety of background materials available to you. I will put a link to a video down below that I did on how you can create some of your own backgrounds. But there's a wide variety, and you can even use concrete floor. Check this floor piece out in my studio. great looking piece that I could use actually in food photography. Don't forget, when you're looking at backgrounds, you're looking at the texture, the tones, the colors. You could even use something like this. This is an old baking sheet here, but look, I'll try and get the light on that for you, but it looks really cool. And if you can get these in a larger size, they work really, really well for a background. And I've used this piece actually quite a few times in photos because I love that beat up, abused looking kind of piece of metal look, especially where it's kind of grungy and dark like that. Works well, especially for those dark and moody images. All right, let me show you a couple ideas that I did with some different backgrounds. Let me just kind of get this tray out of the way here. Now, the first one we're going to look at is basically, I'm just going to basically shoot some apples on this tray. But for a different type of background, we're going to use some wrinkled paper. So I just kind of scrunch it up. This is stuff that came with an Amazon post. They put that big paper in there. Just lay it out, and I start building my little prop set on top of it. It works great as a background because it kind of has that organic feel to it. As I say, backgrounds help tell the sense of place and time. So I then add some other bit of propping to it, and you can see in the finished photo, looks pretty good. And that's just a piece of scrap paper that came in a box from Amazon, but it works well as a background. So keep your mind wide open to different types of background materials. Now, let's look at another one. Again, not your typical background. How about some fabric? Here, I'm using a skirt. I just kind of stretch it out, brand new skirt, never even been worn. It's just in my fashion collection there. But when I lay it all out and I start propping it up, you can see how it starts coming together. Using something as simple as some paper or even a scrap piece of fabric or even a piece of clothing works brilliantly as a background. Now, you saw when I was doing the little setups, I had little bits of prop. Props help add to the theme and help tell our story. It could be a pizza wheel, it could be a knife, a fork, spoon, it could be flowers. The different types of plates and bowls and cups and things that you use are all the propping. Now, I tend to try to stay more in the neutral side of the house because that prop will go with a lot of different things. You don't want something that's very bold in color or weird in shape because it'll take away from what you're trying to show, which is that food item and the story we're trying to tell. So I tend to pull more to the neutral. And if I can find it, I try and get matte, stuff that's not glossy. Why? Because what happens when something's shiny? Light bounces and reflects back, and it makes it harder to photograph. So try and get stuff in matte finishes if you can. It'll make your life a lot easier. But the propping and the accessories we use help tell the story, and it can tell it well when you prop it out. And it's just a matter of chopping and changing your propping to get the best setup you can possibly get. Now, another thing that I do within food photography, and this is another step within the propping, is I try and create layers. Layers help add depth and dimension to your image, not just by putting things in front to the back. That is a way of layering. You also have height layering. So you can use different boxes. You can put a napkin underneath a plate or a bowl. It helps give it another layer to it. You can put a box on top of a box. Then you can put your bowl on top. You can have your slice of cake in front and a cake sitting on a cake tier in behind. You've got different levels going on. So when you're doing your propping and your setup, you want to create different layers. So not just in front to back, which helps create that depth, but you also want to create height, and it'll create more interest in your image. And again, what are we doing? We're helping tell a story to help sell that food, to entice that viewer to want to buy or bite that food. Now, the next step I get into, and I've kind of been thinking about it, I've been going along, but lighting and with the layering. So here I've got a little simple parfait that I created, and it's a blueberry peach parfait. And I gotta tell you, it looks good. Well, I've done my layering from front to back, and I've added some layering on the parfait itself, but my lighting. Now, in this example here, I've got a Studio Octabox in the back. I couldn't put an LED back there to show you how the lighting actually was because I need the LED to shoot the video clip. So I was kind of caught because I don't have a ton of extra lighting, especially in the continuous lighting. So I just put the studio box in the back there to show you the direction where I actually had the LED, because you can see I've got some backlighting going on, and I've got a bounce card up on the side there that I kind of put in and out. I created two images, one with the piece there and one with it gone. That way I can bounce a little light back in on that left side. I can create a mask and then I can paint back where I want the light to come in. Because I wanted more of a light and airy shot to this, I didn't want a dark and grungy look because I didn't think it worked very well. I thought this works great for like early morning, and that backlight gets into the back of those peaches and it helps light it. It helps put a bit of glow to it and makes it more enticing. It makes you want to bite it, try it. And that's, remember, we're trying to invoke all these senses that we possibly can. I've got the granola kind of sprinkled a bit around the base of it. Why? To help try and show the texture and the crunchiness to the granola. And with the light coming through the back of the peaches, how smooth. And the blueberries, if you notice, these ones I've kind of moistened a bit just to help show that they are moist and juicy and plump. So I think the finished image looks really good with this. Quite pleased how that turned out. But you can see, not only did I do layering, but I controlled the lighting and got that look that I wanted for early morning breakfast with a parfait. And I created two. Why? Because my partner is going to have the other one, helping tell my story. Now, I know you're saying, well, this is supposed to be smartphone photography and you haven't shown us anything about the smartphone. Well, these are all the steps I do to get me to this point that I can now consider my smartphone. Now, there's a wide variety of apps available to you. I tend to use in-camera app or the Lightroom app. But like I say, there's a bunch there. You can check it out. Find one that suits your needs and preferences. So as I say, I use in-camera or Adobe Lightroom. Now, the first thing for the smartphone is you see where the lenses are in relation to the bottom here. So when I try to take a photo of, say, this cake, I always get the top. Trying to get a straight on view is very hard. I have to go below the table to try and get it. So what happens if I take my phone and flip my phone upside down? Now the lenses are at the bottom of the cell phone and I can get that low angle. I can get that straight on view. And look at this side-by-side comparison between the first one where I'm shooting down at it and the next one where I flip the cell phone upside down. Look at the difference. I'm now shooting straight onto that food. I'm getting that table level perspective. So that's a trick for you. Flip your cell phone upside down to get a better and a different angle for your food photography. Now, another thing, I use the iPhone 14 Pro. In there, I have a portrait mode. I'm not sure about Android. I never use it, so I honestly can't tell you. I imagine they have something very similar to it. But use the portrait mode in your food photography. It's not just for people. Here's a shot that I did with that Apple setup, and I didn't use portrait mode. It looks okay, but the problem is the background and everything is fully in detail. To create more of a mirrorless or DSLR look to it, use portrait mode. Look at this picture. Wow, it's the same. All I did was switch it to portrait mode. Now, when you go into portrait mode, you have to kind of play with your distance back and forth to get it right. Sometimes it'll tell you right on your app that you need to move back or you need to move closer. You simply do that. Make sure that you click onto your target for where you want your focus and you'll watch your background go out of focus. You can even use your different lenses to help more of a compressed background. So on the iPhone 14 Pro, you've got the 3 lenses, so you can use your telephoto, which is your closest, and that'll compress your background, meaning your background will seem closer to your subject. If you go to more of a wide angle, it'll pull your background away, but you're gonna have to really play with your in and out to keep that background out of focus to get the effect you want. But that's it. So that's how I approach food photography. We've gone through all the different ways that I come up, and it's all about telling that story, how to invoke the senses to get the viewer to want to buy that food, to want to try that food. You will create some stellar images when you kind of follow this little guideline, and I gave you some tips on how I use my smartphone to create better images. So, as I say, that's it for this one. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. Hit that bell notification so you're aware when I post new videos like this. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up. All right, so until the next time.